Hello, and welcome to Round Robin. I'm your host, Robin McCormick with the City of Hampton, and today we're going to tackle a topic that we don't talk about very much. It is about Alzheimer's, but it's really going to focus in on the caregivers who are affected by the disease in a different way. My guest is Katie McDonough from the Alzheimer's Foundation. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you.
I know people who have done this for long periods of time, and caregiving is really, really hard. Tell me some things, that people might experience, or, what really goes on when you're taking care of a loved one with Alzheimer's.
Well, we know that 6 million Americans, more than 6 million Americans, are living with Alzheimer's or related dementia, and most of them are living in the community, and most of them are receiving care from a family member or friend or loved one.
And that's great.
Yeah.
I think that is much better than being somewhere you're getting the best care, you're in your own home, it's probably prolonging their life and their quality of life.
Right.
But
right. The disease takes a great toll on those who are living with a diagnosis. It changes not only our memory. We often think about Alzheimer's and dementia as impacting memory, but it impacts all parts of our brain. And our brain is responsible for everything we do, say, we are, right? Our personality, our behaviors, our ability to control ourselves, our ability to maintain daily functions. And as the disease progresses, the need for caregivers to be a daily part, in many cases a moment-to-moment part of their loved one's life grows. And so they are not only dealing with everything that the rest of us do in daily living, maybe working and maintaining the house, the yard, all of those things, but now they're having to help with daily tasks of lack of independence of their loved one. And in addition to that, many of those who are living with dementia experience changes in their mood.
Yes, they do.
They experience changes in their behavior, and even their personality. You can often see those who are very quiet and docile, laid back, personalities throughout most of their life. And when they develop dementia, they completely change. They become very agitated, anxious, and the caregiver is basically bearing the brunt of that behavior and having to figure out how to respond to it and how to help, mitigate those behaviors and even work with physicians to try and make them go away. And it's really difficult and really personal.
Well, especially if your person has, you love your mom, say, and she's always been kind of calm and becomes a little more angry or more combative. Yeah. That's a doubly hard thing because you're giving everything you can to this person, but you're being rejected almost, or it feels like it. It's hard not to take personally.
Yes, it is. And that's one of the things we do at the Alzheimer's Association is to make sure that we're providing education to caregivers ahead of time, as early as possible, because we want to make sure that they understand it is the disease, right? It's not their loved one. It's not, these types of symptoms are due to changes in the brain. It's the breakdown of neurons, and it's exactly what's happening. And so we want to make sure that they first understand this isn't personal. Secondly, you can't approach these behaviors and these challenges the way that you would with other individuals in your life, or even with this individual at other stages, earlier stages in your life.
Right.
We really have to respond to the disease and not necessarily the person. And so there are many different ways that we can help caregivers learn about how to respond to this as the disease progresses, not just from professionals, but from their peers. Most of the education, most of the support that we do out in the community is peer-to-peer support. People who are going through it, people who have been through it, and can help their neighbors and other community members.
Because even when you can say in your brain, this isn't my loved one, this is the disease, your heart doesn't always follow along.
Oh, yeah. And I think the other piece to this that I think a lot of us have probably learned through the pandemic is the importance of self-care. I think there's been it's a silver lining of the pandemic that I think we've kind of raised the awareness of what self-care means for all of us, but certainly for caregivers, taking care of yourself is incredibly important, and it's often forgotten, and we know research shows that caregivers are impacted by this disease very often from a health standpoint, worse than their loved one with a diagnosis.
Is it really?
Yeah,
I'm not
because they're
surprised.
ignoring their own needs, right? Because they don't have the time, or they're stretched thin, or their focus and energy is on their loved one. They skip appointments. Maybe that knee replacement or that surgery, other surgery that they need, they're putting off because it seems impossible. How am I going to navigate this and provide this care? And so we really want to make sure that caregivers are putting themselves first as much as they can, remembering their own health, their own mental health needs, and getting that support.
How do you get that word across? How do you teach people how to do that?
I think a lot of it, again, comes from, that peer-to-peer knowledge and experience. I mean, I have been working in dementia care for 15 years now, but I have never personally taken care of a loved one with dementia. So I know all of these things. I've seen all of these things in my work, but I've never done it. When a caregiver who's in the thick of it hears this kind of advice from a peer that's been through it, it's incredibly powerful. And it's also making sure that we get them connected to resources and services, because things like respite or companion care, they may not know how to access. And if they can get just a little bit of help, they can go maybe do some of these things that they need to do to take care of themselves.
So how do you do peer-to-peer networking? I mean, my sister-in-law used to go to a weekly support group when she was able to leave her mom and when she had other people there. But how is that going on during the pandemic? Is it virtual now? I mean, how can people connect with other people?
So in the early months, of the pandemic, we transitioned all of our programming in 2 weeks to virtual. So everything that we do, from education programs to caregiver support groups, our support groups for those living with a diagnosis, and our early stage engagement programs. So we have early stage social engagement programs that are designed for those in the early stages of the disease and their care partners. So all of that programming transitioned to virtual. In some cases, it worked brilliantly, and others, some people found this challenging, some people didn't, and really stayed connected. But I think that was a wonderful thing about the association's services, is that we were able to remain present to folks. Now, as we've moved through the pandemic, not necessarily over, but inching our way back to, a new normal, so to speak, we have hybrid programs now. So we have programs that are in person, we have programs that are virtual, and many of our programs for those living with a diagnosis, we have tried to get back to in person because that was challenging.
Right.
Caregivers are a little bit, better at connecting in that way.
Well, and what we've learned through this is that virtual can sometimes reach people who can't be in person.
Oh, it's absolutely true.
You've got a caregiver who maybe can't leave the house.
Yep.
They're not doing things
Absolutely.
24/7, but they can't leave the person alone. They can now be a part of a support group.
Absolutely. And they can be a part of a support group anywhere in the country, right?
Oh,
So we have chapters, 70 plus chapters, all over the United States. And we've had people who were all the way in Washington State who attended one of our support groups because why
the
not?
time I can do it is between 11 and 12 at night,
Right.
and somebody on the West Coast is meeting them.
Absolutely. So, yeah.
That is ideal.
Yep. Absolutely.
Now, the other thing is, you mentioned some supportive services for caregivers because, realistically, I would say I can't have speaking from personal experience, my ankle surgery because there's no one else. So what is available for people who do need a break, whether it's, once a week or for a longer period like that?
Yeah, so one of the other invaluable services that the association provides is the Alzheimer's Association 24/7 helpline. That number is 1-800-272 3900. And that is 24/7, 365 days a year, even through this pandemic. The phone, there was always someone there to answer the phone. And our care consultants there are many of whom are licensed clinical social workers or social work master's level social workers, can answer very basic questions about the disease. If there are questions about particular services or what service options there might be, or even if folks are in the middle of a crisis and they need to know, what do I do next?
Right.
They are there to answer those calls, and we are very well connected to them at the local chapter level. So if there is a need for them to identify specific services in the local area, they will work with our local chapter staff to make sure that there's a follow-up and a care consultation about next steps. And so caregivers can access respite. We can refer them to programs that can subsidize respite, or even provide someone to come in the home to, kind of like a social relationship with their loved one, so they can maybe go grocery shopping or head out to the doctor.
Or go to the gym or take a walk. I mean,
Exactly.
just get out of the house. It's
Exactly.
huge.
And, when you're new to this, finding those services in your local community can sometimes be really challenging. And so we want to be kind of a navigator. We want to be there to answer those questions and help point people in the right direction to find the types of services that they're going to need. And again, those are going to change as the disease progresses. So as early as we can get folks diagnosed and get them connected to the association, the better, because that planning can start.
So how do we do that? If we're in the early stages, my parent has just been diagnosed, what should I do first?
So we would hope that the diagnosing physician would refer to the association. That doesn't always happen. And so we would ask, those who are at that point to pick up the phone and call that helpline. And then from there, ask to connect with the local chapter to learn about the programs and services that are specifically available in that area. Again, we have chapters all over the country. So if you are long distance caregiving, let's say you're in California and your parent is here in Hampton Roads.
Oh, yeah.
You can call us, or you can connect even with your local chapter in California to start getting access to education programs, right? Or caregiver support groups in California. And then even try and connect your loved one here to early stage programming. Right?
So how do we reach out to you?
Again, that helpline, the Alzheimer's Association helpline, that's 1-800-272-3900, or go to our website, www.alz.org. That is chock full of information. If you go there, you can also access the helpline via chat.
Okay.
You can email the association directly, find your chapter, connect.
That's what I was going to say.
directly.
Like, how do we get to your office?
Yeah. So
local resources.
you can email infosiva@alz.org. And that will get you right to us. Again, our local chapter website is alz.org/SEVA for Southeastern Virginia.
Now, I do want to just say one other thing. So you're not just a caregiver, you are also beginning to go through the grieving process, because you are in many ways losing that loved one before they're really gone.
Yeah.
So, are there resources to help with that? How do people, it's a tough transition.
Yeah, we call it complicated grief. That's kind of the clinical term for it, that it's not a grieving process like a grieving process that many of us typically go through, that is post-loss, right? The loss is happening while that person is still alive. And it's interesting to hear the caregiver experience and how they describe, after the death of their loved one, how their grieving process is kind of very different than maybe their peers of loved ones who die from, other diseases where, it may have been sudden or, they're kind of at a different point in their grieving process. And I think what is so phenomenal about those support groups, those caregiver support groups, are that you hear you hear practical information about how to respond to needs and experiences, but you also connect with people who get it. You don't have to explain it. When you share about that grief in the moment, they understand, they can empathize because they're experiencing or have experienced the same thing.
And is that particularly acute? Right now we're in the holiday season in December, but it could be Mother's Day, Father's Day, your anniversary if it's your spouse. I mean, how do holidays complicate all of this?
Well, holidays are loaded for all of us, right? In different ways. And holidays mean different things to different people. I think a lot of us, may assume that the holidays are a positive time. That's not the case for a lot of people in general. And it may or may not be the case for someone who is caregiving for someone with dementia. We want to make sure that you're kind to yourself. And, one of the things as human beings that we do in holidays is we kind of, it's the time in the year that we tend to do way too much, right? We tend to overload the holiday, and at the end we're exhausted, right? It goes by so fast, and we didn't get time to enjoy it. And that's something that for this holiday season or any holiday season, we would tell caregivers to step back, slow down, evaluate how much you're doing or expecting of yourself. And if the holiday season has always been loaded like that, or you've piled on a lot of responsibility for yourself to make it the perfect holiday, spend some time thinking about what you can let go of, right? What is really most important to you? Simplify your holiday experience, because that's going to be easier on you. It's also going to be easier on your loved one.
If you're not stressed out, it is
right.
It is better,
and
right?
It's also overload.
It's also just sort of true universally.
Yeah, right. No, very true.
But yeah,
very true.
Especially in certain circumstances.
And overstimulation for those who are living with dementia, that's what often causes a lot of those behaviors and those personality changes. It's often, particularly in the middle and late stages, things that they may have liked before are way too overstimulating. If they were a person that liked 20, 30 people in the house, at this point, that might be a lot, and not a lot for them and a lot for the caregiver to be balancing at the same time.
Right.
And also, if you're getting together with family, particularly family that you may not be seeing on a daily or weekly basis, communicate to them the changes in your life and your loved one's life, and let them know, what could potentially happen, that maybe agitation or anxiety, even wandering if you're in an traveling to an unfamiliar place, even if you don't experience it at home, you could potentially experience that in a place that your loved one is not familiar with or doesn't remember. So we would really encourage communicating with family or friends if you're going into their home ahead of time about what your needs are. One of those things we often say is make sure that you identify a quiet place where if things do get overloaded or too stimulating, that your loved one can go and just be quiet, take a break, have some downtime. Is really helpful in traveling throughout the holidays.
Okay. Well, I have more questions, but I think maybe we need to tackle those at a different time, because this has been really helpful, and I don't want it to be so long that people won't have time to listen.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for having me today.
Thank you for coming. It's been very educational and warm and supportive. So thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
And thanks to all those caregivers out there who are taking care of people with Alzheimer's, or frankly, are caretakers with people with other diseases, because much of this does apply. And I wish you will take care of yourself and reach out to these resources, because you need to be supported so you can support your person. Thanks for watching.